Hello again, Chris Lee of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. Welcome to the Wednesday Roundtable edition, where I'm joined by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt. We'll talk some football, bowl game, maybe transfer portal. Some of that may depend on where the questions in the mailbag are. We'll talk some basketball. Commodores are off for the better part of a week and a half, but did get a big win over TCU. With what have we got? The Citadel coming up at Conroy's return on Wednesday, a week from today. We'll talk a little bit of that. First, a reminder, basketball season presented by the Wash House. If you are dreading laundry day, who doesn't dread laundry day? I do all our laundry around here. I should be taking my stuff to the Wash House because laundry steals times for the things that I enjoy. The laundry professionals at the Wash House can take care of that for you with two convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Drop off your dirty laundry. Our professional attendants will give you back the time that you need within 24 hours. Pick up your nicely folded, fresh, clean laundry ready to be put away. Check out washhouseclean.com. Stop in today. Get your time back. Tell my good friend Stephen Andrews, and he and I are good friends. We've known each other 25 years. Thank him for his support of our show. Do yourself a favor. Use the Wash House. Baseball season, which is about 2 months and change away, that will be presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. You're going to need ice cream for Christmas. It's just a fact of life. I mean, who wants to go without ice cream anyway? Nobody, hopefully. Anyway, they can help you get your ice cream. Partnership that began over 50 years ago with Billy Derrick in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, North Georgia. They supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with purity products as well as Mayfield, Nestle, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at mpmci.com. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. We have no prearranged plan for the show today. I kind of have an idea of what we'll talk about. Luke, I'm just going to kick it to you first. What would you like to talk about first today?
Well, it's funny you said that. When I was making some notes trying to prep for this, I thought, well, which way are we going to go today? And the first one I want to say is kind of not take a victory lap for myself, but for these kids. We talked at the first of the year. I think most of us thought between 2 and 4 or 4 and 6 wins, and they were able to pull that off. Obviously, limped down down to the finish with the 3 losses, but I felt like the Auburn game was kind of the last gasp to get it done, and they did. And now they get to celebrate with the fan base who they've sold their allotment of, I think it's like 9,000 or 10,000 tickets each school gets. And get to celebrate on the 27th with a bowl game in Birmingham against Georgia Tech. And I'm pretty excited about the prospects. I think it's a good matchup.
Luke, I'm interested. I know, and you should be taking a victory lap. Did you believe this is how it would go down, like this season? I mean, when you look at the schedule before the season, all we were talking about was this is a gauntlet. How is this team going to survive this? It was unconventional. You beat Virginia Tech to start the season, and whoever thought the Alabama win was going to be one of those 6 wins. So, how different was it maybe than how you might have thought it was going to go?
Well, I think if we're all honest with ourselves, none of us saw the Alabama game. I mean, no one can say they predicted that. So you flip that with Georgia State. I felt like Virginia Tech, Auburn, Kentucky, and we all thought at the time South Carolina was not going to be as good as they were. I think between those 4 games is where you'd have gone. In fact, Billy, I think I heard you and Chris early on talk about that if they are to get to 5 or 6 wins, that it would be an Auburn or a Kentucky. So except for the Alabama game, it's kind of what we thought their path was to get to 6.
And Chris, it's interesting. we talk about, well, the book got out on them, or, they were banged up, and trying to find reasons why they might have slipped a little bit down the stretch. I go back to, you're in the SEC, and he had to go on the road and face LSU, a team that had just lost 3 in a row. You're facing a Tennessee team desperate to make the college football playoff, but none of those games were ugly blowouts. None, I think that is something after last year. You look at the South Carolina game from last year, it's 44-7. And there were too many games last year where Vanderbilt was not even close. So, Chris, I look at that too, that none of these games were ugly other than that South Carolina game, really. I do kind of throw that one out. But I think that's a step forward for this program. Now, again, you got to keep this rolling and see what happens here in the offseason. But just surviving without and you lost by 11 to Tennessee, you lost by 3 to Texas, you lost by 3 to Missouri. That's a big difference from what those games looked like a couple of years ago.
Last year they played 9 Power 5 games. They lost them all, I think, by at least 17 points. And as I said before the season, they've got to be a lot better for them to be a little bit better in any meaningful way. And I thought that was too much to bite off. And you know me, I like to quantify things. I don't think you can quantify everything, but this gives you an idea. They were projected to be about 6.5 points below an average FBS team coming into the season. They end up being about 5.5 points above average. They were 2 full touchdowns better. And these things track, you could say, well, they're meaningless, but these things track really well with betting odds. Like this little model I've got usually was in about a point of whatever the line is going to be when you add teams up. That's staggering. And it, and the thing I said before the season, I'm going to judge them more by like, how did the games look than the win-loss record, frankly, because I thought 6-6 was just, I don't know about ridiculous, but that was a hefty ask. I thought the more fair way to judge them might be, have they shaved off 6 or 7 points difference between what they were last year and what they are this year? No, they did that and then some, and then they won some games. I think this staff got as much as it could out of this team. I think you started to see the cracks everywhere as the season ended, except for special teams. That stayed rock solid. In fact, it started good and got elite by season's end. I think everybody laughed at us, Billy, for our takes on the offense in fall camp. I think the second half of the season, you got to see a lot of what it looked like in fall camp, which I wish it didn't. I was really enjoying, the fun it was the first half of the season, but you saw their limitations on display. I think this coaching staff, the only thing I will criticize, I didn't really get their defensive strategy against Tennessee. With the front change. I don't know if that was related to injury, but like if you're asking me to pick flaws with this staff, that's about all I can come up with. I mean, I'm sure I could come up with some smaller things, some decisions here and there, maybe the Georgia State game. That's the only time this year that I'm just like, wow, that might be a miss. Other than that, they got an A+ for the way they handled this season.
Yeah, Luke, I wanted to ask you about that, the defensive strategy against Tennessee. What'd you think?
It's take away one of the things they do the best. What they didn't want them to do is when you know how Tennessee spreads the field and makes you play in space. Well, when you put the receivers out past the numbers, if you only have a 3-man rush, that kind of keeps them from doing that type of stuff because you've got a couple of guys over there to be able to make a tackle on one guy. So they don't beat the one guy and take it in for 6 with their speed. Where it did hurt us was, even though our pass rush isn't great anyway, it null and voided a pass rush. We didn't have any. So what happens is and give Tennessee credit for this. After about midway through the second quarter, they realized what we were doing and said, look, we're just going to run digs and glances and run away from you. Those crossing routes across the field are in the middle of the zone. And then their speed was just so if we take a misstep one way or the other, or when we're passing a kid off in a route, if we make a misstep there, it's going to go for long gains. And that's what happened. And then in the second half, you started seeing what they ran 40 plays to our 11 or something like that. Mm-hmm. they turned the formula on us. They said, look, Vanderbilt can't beat us if we don't give them the ball a bunch of times. So I just felt like, it was a strategy. Did it work? No, it worked for a little while. We got the big lead early, but it was just a matter of time before their speed. And one thing I want to say too, guys, we were talking about what this team needs to improve on and why the season went the way it did. Yes, injuries, absolutely. I felt like going into Auburn, they had to win that game to get one more. I was really worried about that one. And I think also in the portal, one of the things we have to look at, and I think there'll probably be criticism of this, we're going to have to get depth out of the portal as well as guys that are plug-in starters, because I feel like that's the main thing that happened to us down the stretch is our difference from our A's to our B's and C's is still a big difference in the SEC.
Yeah. They're going to be a very heavy portal team going forward, I think. I think that the class they signed 13 guys. I think especially on the offensive line and probably the defensive line too. I think that is just going to be something fans need to get. I could see a day a year or two from now where they have an entire offensive line built out of the portal. I mean, Grayson Morgan might be the exception, and probably someone else I'm forgetting. But, I mean, that is the way this is going.
Yeah, and you say depth, Luke. I think that's another that was an important word last year, but it's still important and still, that's going to be an issue probably for the next year or two until Vanderbilt can build out that depth. But it's not necessarily the frontline guys. Like, if you lined up and played Tennessee, said we're going to play 2 quarters of football and put your best out there, Vanderbilt, maybe it's different, but at the same time, you got to play 4 quarters and you've got to use your depth. Tennessee was beat up. They used their depth, to their advantage. Vanderbilt, that's another word, like behind Pavia. Yeah, he didn't. I can't believe he went back into the game. I thought on that 4th and 2, he got lit up. Goes back in the game, wasn't the same. I thought that hit, but again, maybe if you have a backup quarterback that can run the system to a T, similar to Pavia, maybe you feel more confidence going in there with a backup quarterback, or defensive line and offensive line wise. Offensive line I thought got worse throughout the season, and that's natural. I'm not blaming those guys. That's happened before, Luke. You've seen that, but depth on the lines of scrimmage. I think they're building out their depth fine at the skill positions and even at DB and safety. I know they're going to get some portal guys there, but depth on the offensive and defensive lines, Luke, that's paramount, I feel like, especially heading into next season.
More so on the offensive line because, guys, we only played really 6.5 guys there.
Yeah.
And
especially with this offense.
Yes, with the reps that they had and, the time of possession, the plays we were running in our first 9 games when we controlled the clock and ran more plays than the other team most days, that's the same 5-6 guys doing it over and over and over. And by the time you kind of become a zombie at some point as an offensive lineman, you just do, unless you're able to play 9 or 10 guys. Well,
and Gunnar Hansen leaving. I don't think that helps, but I don't think it's a big kill either. So portal heavy in the offensive line. You're right, Chris.
Do you guys think it's fair to say, and I want to move discussion to an area of defense, but I think it's fair to say they are looking to upgrade the offensive line, particularly at the tackle spots.
Yep.
No doubt. No, I agree with that. A Gunnar would have probably been an all-SEC guard. But he's not a tackle. He's just not. And he did the best he could. Thought he held up really well early in the season, but as the season went on, people on film watch what he can and can't do. And nothing against Gunnar. He gave everything he could, but he had a lot of penalties and stats. So he wasn't comfortable. And like I said, I think he'd be a really good guard, but he was forced to play at tackle because we didn't have another option.
I do wonder – and I don't mean this disparaging. If you can't play tackle at Vanderbilt, and if playing tackle is the issue, I don't know. Because let's face it, they got better at tackle through the portal with Chase Mitchell and some guys. I think Cade
McConnell.
I started to say O'Donnell or O'Connell. I get the yips with that one. Anyway, that guy. I do wonder sometimes when kids put their names in the portal, it's an NIL play. I have no info here, but I do wonder if he's going to look around and find out and say, "Hey, look, maybe I'm better off to come back, play guard." That is no information, but I'm just going to throw that out there. The place I wanted to talk about was defensive back. I thought Martell Hyde had a really under the radar good year. Not just the corner play, but the punt returning play, which he got rewarded for. He was second team all SEC as a return guy. I thought Jalen Lackey tried. Anytime you play as a freshman corner, if you're good enough to be out there, to me, that tells me something. I mean, the number of future NFL corners that got abused in this league as true freshmen that's a large number. So I don't really make a judgment about Jalen Lackey. In fact, I think just him being out there was a sign. You look back, Luke, you said injuries, and I'm thinking, all right, where do we go with this? Like, where do they have injury problems in terms of guys being out? I think that Langston Patterson playing back up or playing banged up. I think we know about Pavia. The two FBS corners, though, guys, I'm like, you don't think about that because they never played a snap. Their seasons were over way before the season ever started. You bring back Lackey, you bring back Height, you bring those two guys back, assuming everybody's full speed. I think all of a sudden you've got a lot of depth at corner.
Yeah.
I mean, like in a way that they haven't had in a long time potentially.
Yeah, I mean, we saw two guys play it. I won't name names because I don't like to do that, but we saw two guys play corner this year that would probably not seen the field if those two corners would have been playing for us. And
I don't know. I might push back on Hyde. I think that he might have been. I don't know. You know better than I do.
That's why I'm not naming names. There's a couple others that play.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then you're going to bring in a couple more as well. I mean, next year that'll be I don't think most people are worried or should be worried about the defense. I think offensively, how do you build that offensive line? How do you bring in a couple of more receivers? At running back's interesting. Really like Cedric Alexander, obviously AJ Newberry as well, but do you feel like you can upgrade there? I mean, you're in the SEC. You got to remember that, and you've got to have an offense that can consistently score to win games, especially if you want to take that next step on the road and beat LSU in Baton Rouge or beat Tennessee at home. Offensively, guys, that's my not concern, but that's what I'm honed in on this offseason. Defensively, I think they'll be fine. Also, with Clark Lee, that'll be another interesting question. How much longer is Clark Lee the defensive coordinator as well? But offense is where I'm at, guys.
One more quick thing about offensive line. We see it here in town with our professional team. Their biggest problem is the offensive line. You can't get anything done. It's like having a car that's stuck in neutral. If you don't have an offensive line, guys, you're not going to get anything done at all. And especially if you don't have receivers or a running back that's a special running back like a Saquon Barkley type, you're not going to get anything done offensively.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the reason your quarterback played banged up 90% of the year was going back to offensive line. I mean, their sack, like if you just look at their sack numbers, they were pretty good. That doesn't even begin to tell the story. Like that guy ran for his life. I was going to say every other snap. I think it was more than that the second half of the season. That you just didn't have a breakaway running back. That is a big need.
Yeah. And everybody, Luke, would you agree? People were sending the house. I mean, they were sending the kitchen sink at Vandy after that South Carolina game.
Yeah, I saw more A-gap blitzes than we'd seen all year in those last 4 games.
Because Alabama, you go back to that Alabama game, it's almost laughable, the difference. Like you look at what Alabama's defense did compared to any other, South Carolina. Every other defense since the Alabama game did the opposite of what Alabama did. So, I guess you can thank Alabama's defense if you're the other SEC teams, but it's crazy going back to that Alabama game. There wasn't a single defense that that played that way. Naturally, they lost
All
that
right.
game.
I'm going to sum it up this way. We all agree that they played with a quarterback way less than 100% all year. We all agreed that they had a backup that they didn't trust to throw the ball. How many wide receivers did they have that demanded double coverage? None. They're not bad. Don't get me wrong.
They got 6 wins out of that.
Go watch LSU. Even watch Tennessee, which is a middle of the pack. Like, there's a big difference between athleticism there. Now, Stowers, if you want to throw him in that category, but I question was he banged up too? Their running back room, I would rank last in the SEC, maybe by a good margin. They scored how many points on average the first half of the season? I mean, the fact that they had any success was a credit to Tim Beck. I think he held on to this and he made it work as long as he could. But you saw the holes the last month of the season, especially when they started playing a bunch of defenses that were top shelf in the league. And I don't think there's any mystery where they need help next year because it is everywhere.
Well, the other thing that we talked about this some is the schedule you're dealt. As it turned out, and you don't know exactly who's going to be good and who's not each year, but I think us and Florida were dealt probably the toughest game. And you got to turn around and play them again.
Alabama too.
I think that's very lazy on the SEC to do it that way, but I don't know how they do it. I don't know what, because we've got I'm a big believer. It's not who you beat, it's who you play and how that works out. And to go 6-6 with that schedule next year, to get to 6-6 is going to be just as difficult. Although I do like the fact that the tougher teams, I think that will be the tougher teams, will play the road anyway.
Yeah.
The team who have a chance to beat, most of them will be at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think Greg Sankey has done a terrific job as commissioner. I think he didn't think some things through with this. I heard this brought up on another show the other day, and I think this is terrific. I think right now you almost should make an NFL-type scheduling model within your league. Now, I don't know how much you can control out-of-conference games and how much that plays into it. By the way, if I'm an SEC team right now, I'm scheduling the 4 easiest out-of-conference games I can schedule. Do it the way James Franklin did it if you're Vanderbilt. Now, I hated it. I hated the product. But the system is going to play out the way it does, where you got to get 6 wins to go to a bowl, basically, and losses are all that matters in terms of making the playoff right now. You could beat the Chiefs 6 times, but if you lose 3 games, you're screwed. That's the way it is. And Greg Sankey, as much as I like him, he bears some responsibility for not thinking this out because, like, you can't go make a money grab and grab Oklahoma and Texas and then not think, okay, how might this affect us in the playoff the next year?
Well, yeah.
And here, let me unpack it one step further. If Texas is not in the league, Alabama's in the playoff because Texas is going out of the Big 12 and Alabama's going out of the SEC.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of ramifications, the schedule included. The fact that if you got screwed this year with the schedule, which Vanderbilt did, several other teams did. I think Tennessee and Texas got the easy ends of it. You get to go play that again next year.
Right.
Good luck to you as a coach, especially if you're one that enters the year on the hot seat because of the way you didn't perform this year.
That's the thing with this season. I mean, Chris, you said it a few minutes ago. 6 wins felt like almost insurmountable.
Yeah.
And for them to get to that, I don't know if there's anything else. There's negative things, right, about the season, right? Maybe you could have gotten to 7 if things go another direction. But with that schedule, that's a top half, tough strength of schedule in the SEC. And so, and you beat Alabama at home. That was probably the win that got you over that hump. But, everything happens for a reason as well. I don't think the Georgia State loss.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we may not ever see another Vanderbilt season quite like this, especially with the impact it could have down the road as well.
Think about this, guys. Of the 12 games, all but 2 of them were one-score games.
Yeah.
Alcorn State, of course. But, that's unbelievable.
And the 2 that weren't came late in the season when the toll of the depth really started to affect them. And you're like, if they got a path to victory, it's about that big.
Yeah.
Well, and just think, you got up 14-0 on Tennessee, and then in about a blink of an eye, Tennessee's right back in it. And before you know it, they're up by 7 at the half. So they're, I don't want to say maybe killer instinct, but their edge to suffocate somebody was not really there anymore. They I think the last time they had done that was probably that Kentucky game where they just kind of lulled Kentucky to sleep. They didn't really do that, and maybe the Auburn game, to a degree. But even that game was ugly, and Vanderbilt just got out of there with the win. But since that Kentucky game, I'd say they were not able to play to their identity on offense, and whether that's offensive line, whether that's play calling, whether that's quarterback, receiver, there's a lot that goes into that. They're gonna have to figure that out this offseason.
Go ahead, Luke. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, if you want to know how remarkable what they did was, go back to the Ball State game. Ball State ended the year as one of the 10, 12 worst teams in the FBS. Coach got fired. They couldn't separate from Ball State. And maybe they showed up and sleptwalked. But, I mean, the fact that they couldn't just overpower a team like that that had been giving up, yards left and right was
a good example.
Yeah, I mean, look, they schemed this thing up to where on the right day, if a lot of stuff goes your way, they were good enough to beat what was in the number 1 team in the country, an Alabama team that I think should have been in the playoff and would have been in the playoff had Vanderbilt not beaten it. On the bad end, the talent, they were so hamstrung by talent, which was still a lot better than a year ago, that they could lose to Georgia State on any given day, and Ball State could be a one-score game, midway through the fourth quarter or early in the fourth quarter, whatever it was.
But you could also beat Alabama.
The 3 things that we talked about all year they had to do: time of possession, penalties, and the what was the third one?
Turnovers.
Take care of the football.
Turnovers.
Yeah.
Be ahead in each one of those. If you look, every game we won, that was the case. Every game we lost, that was the case. We didn't win any of those.
Well, I think they were number 2 in the country in fewest turnovers. Yeah. If I'm not off by more than a spot or 2.
Yeah.
And I mean, if they turned it over once or twice, that was usually it.
And guys, the next step is expanding your margin for error. Having a game where you can turn the ball over a couple of times, but you have enough talent to go win the game still. Like Tennessee, that was a pathetic start. I mean, there was probably meltdowns on their boards, Chris, right? So we're about to lose to Vandy and miss the playoff. But snap of a finger, they're back in it. That I think Vanderbilt can get there. Maybe it's not next year, but down the road, if they bring in enough talent, that's obviously the next step, where that is still the formula, but maybe there's games where you don't play up to that formula and you can still win. They weren't able to do that really this year. I mean, I'll be interested to see, looking back at this schedule, what was the game where they maybe got close to doing that? Maybe it was Auburn. They didn't really play great at all against Auburn. I don't think they really turned it over. Kentucky, Pavia had a pick and they still ended up winning that, but they also got a turnover of their own. So that's the next step, just getting past that and finding ways to win despite, maybe not playing perfectly up to that formula.
I think Auburn was the best defensive performance of the year.
Yeah.
That's the team that put up, 40 points against Texas A&M or something. So,
that was overtime too, or double overtime,
right?
Or triple, but still.
And, for us to hold them to 7 points is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's an important season. I think that's what I'll say about this year. They needed it. You had to have it. If you go 5-7, I think that's still a step forward, but part of me, guys, thought they had to get to 6 here, and they do, and they get a beautiful setup for a bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, this is perfect. You get a couple of days after Christmas in Birmingham. You've played there before in 2014. Chris Harris from WSMV joked with me, who ran faster that day, Jordan Matthews or James Franklin, a couple of days later in the press conference.
Yeah, I was there for that.
But no, it's perfect setup. I know we'll get to it in some of these mailbag questions, but I'm happy for the guys, like you said, Luke, to get a nice setup for a game. You don't have to. And Clark admitted it last night at the event. He said, "I'm glad this is the timing of this." That was a small hint that they're glad that they're in Birmingham as opposed to Tampa on December 20th. But no, it's just a great setup for them.
I don't want to spend too long here because we need to talk basketball and get to the mailbag, and I kind of need to be out in around 20 minutes. But I didn't like the bowl matchup for them. What are you guys seeing that I'm not? I know I know Tech lost a big time receiver, but to me that's a fast team, or I mean it's a physical team, which concerns me. We saw how that went. It's a well coached team. They got a Haynes King. I don't know. They took Georgia to how many ever overtimes that was, and frankly should have won the game in Athens, where Georgia had everything to play for. To me, in the back of my head, I know this is not a popular opinion. I was thinking the best thing for them might be to slip out of the SEC's bowl pecking order and go catch the number 6 team in the MAC in Detroit or whatever that looks like, just to get somebody that they can just beat on talent alone. Because I think win 7 is a tough ask.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's two similar teams, really. I mean, yeah, they're more physical than us possibly, but they are same thing. We're both trying to control the clock and possession football. And it could be a really quick game, I can tell you that. It may be one of those when we get in under 3 hours for sure. It'll be the same thing, though, Chris. I think I think we will be able to stop them early on. As the game wears on, we may need to get out in front and hold a lead. It may be that type of game. I haven't thought a whole lot about that. I just think that now that everybody has a chance to get healthy, if you're not able to play in this game, that's because you've got an injury, not that you're hurt. And I feel like that this time off will help us have fresher legs and feel like playing. Who do you think? Let me ask you guys this: who do you think's more excited about playing in the bowl, Vanderbilt or Georgia Tech?
Vanderbilt, because Georgia Tech last year, I want to say, was in the Gasparilla Bowl, and for them, again, they started the season off with that win against Florida State. I think for them, they thought they could get to 9, maybe even 10, and compete in the ACC after that. You start the season, now you realize what Florida State became, but I think it's Vanderbilt. I mean, you have this is their 10th bowl game in program history. Like we've got to remember that, and they got a chance getting to 7. Clark is gonna hammer that, because Derek Mason, did he win a bowl game?
No.
I mean, and that put a damper on those seasons. It really did, and that was a lack of that. You could tell there was a lack of control of the program. Clark can prove that he's got the pulse of the guys still, and I think it's a good setup. Chris, I don't love the matchup. I like the peripheral. Like, okay, you're playing at 2:30. It's a Friday. You're in Birmingham. It'll be a good crowd. You're on ESPN, I think, nationally. But, yeah, for Vanderbilt specifically, it's not the best matchup. But I think it helps that they lost their best receiver, Eric Singleton, rumored to be maybe going to Georgia. Imagine that. Their starting safety actually just hit the portal. One of their starting safeties from Georgia Tech just got word from somebody. So they're not a team talent-wise that I think can overwhelm you. Now, physically, maybe this gets to the fourth quarter, and they can. Their quarterback and running back is probably one of the better duos in the country with Haynes and Haynes King, and then Jamal Haynes. But it's just going to be fun. I'm glad they got this matchup as opposed to, December 20th, either in Tampa or Detroit. Now, maybe for getting that win number 7, like you said, Chris, maybe that would have been more ideal. But for the eyes, for the general fan, I like this better.
Well, to Luke's question, who's more excited to be here? That's always hard for me to answer because I could see it a couple of ways. I could see it the way you outlined it. I could also see Tech going, "Hey, we were this close to beating Georgia. Should have beaten Georgia. We got something to prove." I don't know if guys hopping in the portal at key spots is an indication of morale, or if that's just the reality we live in these days with the portal. Some of these guys are going to come back. Maybe not at Tech. I don't know. I'm just in general. Some of these guys will hop in the portal to get paid more and come back. So I'm not even entirely sure what that means. But one more thing before we flip the basketball. Luke, I haven't talked to you about this in a while. Feeling on the quarterback situation for next year with Pavia. Well, I think we got this question in the mailbag, but let's just go ahead and hit it now. And by the way, if you're tracking portal quarterbacks in case they need one, I just got a text. I guess the Daniel Mensah kid from Tulane, who would be one of the better ones and would fit them, is going to Duke. Mm-hmm. But Luke, where do you think this is headed?
I think you can't wait to find out about the Pavia situation. Obviously, you're going to have a portal quarterback no matter what. I'm a big fan of St. Hilaire that's on the roster. Now, to come in next year as a redshirt freshman and be the starter, no. So we're going to have to do a portal. I'll be honest with you, Chris. I don't have one name in mind. I think Mateer from Washington State. I don't know if he's made a decision yet, but I do like him. Of the film I've watched on guys, I like him probably the best.
I may be a couple days late. Was the popular opinion on Mateer that he was going to
Oklahoma because his Oklahoma OC is there?
Jackson Arnold is in the portal. I mean, Jackson Arnold's a 5-star kid coming out of high school. I've always thought that's a kid that, with the athleticism, might be a fit. I was very interested to see the two Mississippi State quarterbacks are in the portal. Yeah, Michael Van Buren would be a great fit, I think, for what they do.
I didn't know they.
I think. Yeah,
he's a Mississippi kid.
I think Arnold's going to land at Mississippi State most likely.
Interesting,
because I think Levy recruited him there.
Boy,
but yeah, I mean they're going to have options, like Luke said.
They're
going to get a good portal quarterback. Either way, this slices out. But you're right. You can't wait. You can't sit there and wait on Pavia because this is going to drag out. I mean, welcome to the NCAA.
One more question for you guys. We know Nate Johnson's gone. What do you feel about the other quarterbacks? Will they Berlowitz and the other two?
I'll be interested.
I didn't see enough to just know. I mean, the St. Hilaire buzz is kind of interesting. I can't remember, Billy. Was he good when we saw him in practice? I think he flashed some stuff from what I remember. Now thinking back to the scrimmages. Like, to me, he was clearly the better between he and Muschamp in the class when we saw them play. Yeah.
I think something you got to remember is Tim Beck recruited Jack Elliott. Tim Beck, Jerry Kill recruited Jack Elliott here. They did not recruit Hilaire and Muschamp.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens with those guys? It could be another roster with 8 quarterbacks. I mean, do you need that? I don't think so. There will probably be 1, maybe 2 more departures because of Elliott coming in and a portal guy coming in. But I don't think. I think my question is, if Pavia stays, are they still bringing in a portal quarterback? Is my question.
Well, they may have, like I said, they may have to make that decision before that comes down. I don't know. That is kind of the thing,
right?
I'm going to throw another scenario at you too. And no information here. What if Nate Johnson hits the portal and finds out, hey, I don't have a clearly better situation. He is a quarterback that's going to have to fit the right system. He got paid a whole lot of money to come here a year ago. He's been in the system. He's familiar with the coordinator. They know him. Don't think he was a locker room issue from anything I can tell. Do you get in, look around, decide the grass was greener where I started?
Well, he did say he's open to playing receiver, and I guarantee you, there's a school. There's probably a Power 4 school out there that looks at his speed and say, "Hey, you want to come play receiver for us?"
Sure.
So my bet is that he goes plays receiver.
You can play
somewhere.
Receiver here too. I mean, they
right.
They had
I wonder.
a need.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to hit basketball for a minute, then hit the mailbag?
Yeah.
Luke, I'll let you start with hoops and where you are.
Yeah, I've watched every minute of every game. I'm really excited, but Chris, last year you and I talked about this. About I pushed back a little bit about how strong the SEC was last year. Well, this year it may be the strongest I've ever seen it. I've watched every team play, I think, except South Carolina and Missouri, and I think Vanderbilt can finish anywhere from 8th to 16th. That's how wild it is.
Yeah.
The lack of size is going to mean they're going to have to win a lot of high-scoring games, in my opinion, because of the style of play. But they've got a lot of options, man. And defensively, when Huffman and Tanner are in there together, they are a dynamic duo. And I know it's non-conference and competition hadn't been the best, but against Power 5 teams, TCU, Virginia, Seton Hall, and those teams, that's when they've shown up and played their best. And I think they've got one more level to them. I think Coach Byington is a terrific hire. To be able to mesh what he's brought in, which is basically a 99% on an entirely new team. And I know there's a few other teams that are like this. He's done one heck of a job.
Yeah, Edwards is phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's more like, he's not Darius Garland, and he may not be as explosive as Mignon, but he's almost a mix of those two guys. Where if you look at his game, like he's explosive. He can get to he's not just a shooter.
No.
He gets to the rim, and maybe he's not as good of a facilitator as Garland was, because a lot of times Edwards, he's got the ball, he's going to go score, right? So he's a baller. I mean, he puts the ball in the basket, but pieces like McLaughlin, Hogard when he's on, Nickel when he's on, I think he's probably got to get more consistent. You go down the line, guys, they're probably about 9-10 guys deep where you can trust. And if Roberts steps into a bigger role, I mean, they've got some things here. Now, SEC play, I cannot wait to see what happens in SEC play. And Chris, I know you've got power rankings and SEC numbers and things to look at, but I'm interested to get your perspective on where do they stack up, at least so far statistically, in the SEC.
A few things running through my head. I've been trying to comp Edwards to somebody, and it's been a while since this guy's played, so it may not be the best comparison, but he almost, there's a little Devin Downey in him, maybe. Played at South Carolina about a decade, just killed Vandy.
I remember, yeah.
Just that small guard who can take it to the rack, and good luck stopping him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is making some plays from the point guard spot in terms of taking it to the rack and finishing that they hadn't had a point guard that could make as long as I watch Vanderbilt basketball, with the exception of Darius Garland. I may be forgetting. Luke, am I forgetting anybody here?
No, but I'm going to go back even farther than that. Chris, you'll remember him. I don't know if Billy will. Tyus Edney, who played at UCLA. That's who he reminds me. And
Edney was. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
His shot, the key to Edwards is because his shot off quicker than anybody I've ever seen. And he explained the post game with Tim Thompson and Kevin Ingram. He said, when I was always the smallest guy when I was growing up, I played with older guys. And he said, to get my shot off, I had to learn how to shoot it quick. And he has carried that on as he's gotten older. And it's the reason why he is as good as he is, because you have to respect his outside game, because he'll let that thing go in a half of a second.
I'm looking up Edney, and Edwards was more of a scorer. Edney, I think Edney was more of a distributor, so that's a thing. But I mean, in terms of just being quick with the ball and everything, I get where you're going. Yeah,
get to the basket.
And I think Tyler Tanner, we talk about Darius Garland, I think he can turn into a guy like that. But already through 10 games, he's got 26 steals, 20 assists, and 0 turnovers.
Yeah,
he's the only player in the country with 10 plus steals or 10 plus assists and no turnovers as a freshman, a true freshman.
Well, there's 3 or 4 guys that I think are just having really phenomenal years statistically. He's one of them. He's leading the SEC in steals, like number of steals. I don't mean average, number of steals, which is crazy for how much he's not on the floor.
Almost 3 steals per game.
Yeah, I mean the no turnover thing that should have gotten snapped. he turned one over and the pass got fumbled and he got bit. But I mean, still, that would have been the first. So yeah, I think they've really got something with him. I think he's maybe going to be a superstar one day, and that day may not be far away.
Huffman.
I did not. Huffman's another one I want to talk about. The one I was going to go to next, and I don't entirely understand how they come up with the calculation. I think it has something to do with like how many points you are responsible for per 100 possessions. But it Sports Reference right now, Devin McLaughlin's leading the SEC in offensive rating.
Wow.
And we know the rebounding games he's had. He's had some, several double-doubles. Huffman's another one. I looked at what he did a year ago from Davidson and thought, how are we not talking about this kid more? He's a disruptor. I mean, I think that the league is brutal. I think this team a lot of years could be an NCAA tournament team and a lot of other SECs. I'm not sure if this one's going to get there because it's going to be an unforgiving league. And I feel like, the injury to Kajani Wright, or injury may not be the right term, but that absence is going to hurt them more than I thought it would. I think because of the depth situation. But I mean, the pieces here that he's put together, the style of play, they're fascinating in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And there's players. Yeah. Go ahead, Luke.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say there's players that we haven't seen in a while in Vanderbilt uniforms, types of players like McLaughlin. When's the last time we saw a guy like him at 6'7" that's athletic, can shoot it a little bit, can score? There's versatile players that we haven't seen in the last 5-6 years. So that to me, Luke, is exactly a good example of Byington knew he needed a certain type of guy. And to bring in here, he needed shooters. He also needed guys like McLaughlin and even Huffman. I mean, Huffman's a winner. He's going to make winning plays. And MJ Collins, too. If he can, I think a key is Collins' shooting, because he could be that extra guard that, if he hits a couple of threes a game, that could really help you out. But that caught my eye, Luke, the fact that they're just so versatile, and they have it. They weren't really versatile under Stackhouse. You couldn't really say that.
No, there's still a couple of things that I'm not questioning, but I can't wait to see if Hemingway's going to be able to contribute as a scorer off the bench. You hate to mess with a good rotation of 9 that's working right now, but there are going to be times when we're behind late in the game that you need somebody to just come in and hit threes. And I think Hemingway can do that if he can stay healthy. I think he's got either a calf or a plantar fasciitis, one of the two. I've heard both. It may be a combination of the two. So if he could just be able to come in and give you 4 or 5 minutes a game at the end of games, that could help. The second thing, and I want to ask you guys this, because of the size problems we're going to have in the SEC against a lot of SEC teams who have those 7-foot guys, our best lineup to me is when we have Carey and McLaughlin in the game at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way, or is that the way we're going to have to play more in the SEC, or will we still see the same thing we're seeing right now?
I think the way I put it, you play that as much as you can get away with it. I'm worried about foul trouble with Carey, and like you can't play them both 40 minutes. I mean, like you'd love to if you could. And I think when they're both out there, that makes it work. But I mean, one more point before I get us, we need to get to the mailbag, and I've got to hop off in a minute. I just give them, you mentioned Hemingway, that just got me thinking. I give Mark Byington an A, almost an A+ for roster construction, because Hemingway's the one thing they don't have that's an accurate guy off the wing. Not that Nickel can't hit some shots at times, but they need a guy that's like a high percentage guy. He gives them that if they can get him healthy. And Kajani Wright, I don't think was ever maybe the shot blocker that, was going to be a game changer like you see at other tent rosters, but he was the best they had. He would have helped them in terms of rim protection. And like if they had all the parts the way that he'd put it together, they would have at least made a stab with those two guys at addressing the two biggest holes on the roster. And again, this was not taken over Kentucky. This was not taken over. This was taken over a program that is somebody on another college staff that knows Vanderbilt told me. How did he put it? Basically, the gist of it was you're going to have to pay a little bit of a tax as a Vanderbilt because you've just been so bad for so long. I give Mark an A. Maybe if those guys were healthy, I might be giving him an A+ for roster construction.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
One other kid I want to mention that helps us with rim protection, and he doesn't do it at the rim. He does it a great job of it trailing the play is Chris Mannion, blocking behind. I think his athleticism, that's the reason why he's starting, because he kind of creates that early in the game to where you can get a little momentum maybe off of loose balls and fast breaks.
Yeah, the coaching. I mean, we talk about Tim Beck and getting as much out of that offense. I mean, there's more out there for this basketball team, but Mark Byington in the portal in the offseason, he squeezed as much out of there, and he's put together a pretty good team.
All right, Billy, I've got to hop to another pod here in a second. Let's do a rapid fire round in the mailbag.
Right.
I'll have you pick the best 2 or 3 that we can answer pretty quickly. While you're looking those up, today's mailbag sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Guest line also presented by John Levin of Wobblebond Dickinson. Thanks to student-athletes at Vanderbilt for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Also presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-the-line packaging automation. All right, Billy, I'll let you read the question. You give your answer. Luke will give his, and I've got anything to add. I'll wrap up, and let's just do a couple here, maybe the best ones in the mailbag. Anyway, go.
From Nash Native 615, has Vandy been open with who they are recruiting in the portal, but limiting what is being allowed to be reported, or has the recruitment been kept quiet? I mean, fairly quiet. I know we've talked about Mateer for a while. There's some other guys, people surfacing on Twitter. There's a few guys from Alabama that I think they may land, an edge rusher. But there's names out there, but for the most part, guys, that it has been pretty tight-lipped. And that's the portal, and especially at Vanderbilt, you don't want to get it out there that you've got a guy, you've offered a guy or you've got a guy visiting. I know that'll get out of it, that'll you typically get out eventually, but it has been fairly tight-lipped.
There's a board in the staff room that they keep under wraps that they bring out when they have their staff meetings. I probably have it on computer by now, but it's going to have 20 names at offensive line, 20 names at D-line linebacker. You've got so many people that you're going to approach and see if they, it's almost like fishing. You're just putting some bait on the hook and see who snags it. And there's no telling who it could be right now.
Yeah. They're very tight-lipped by nature. I think as they get more portal heavy by design, it's gotten even more so.
Let's see. Here's a good one. Thoughts on Dearmeyer speaking to the team from GBarks24 directly during the season. I don't recall Zeppos ever doing that while he was chancellor. I mean, it's a small gesture. It is what it is. You guys may have opinions.
Hey, only thing I know, Zeppos told us we had a rocket ship back when Franklin was here. If we need a rocket ship, we'll buy a rocket ship. I remember that.
I'll give Dearmeyer a lot of credit. Zeppos would hide from his own shadow. That guy, how many games this year did he walk through the press box this year and say hello to us, other people, the media? I think speaking to the team. I mean, the narrative since he got here was it's a guy who cared about sports. Do I have some issues with some ways he could have maybe helped him and hasn't? Yeah, but I think overall it's a big difference.
All right, VU Superior. This will be the last one here. A lot of them we already answered earlier. How does the $24 million in NIL rank in the SEC? Any notable programs we're ahead of? Or is that?
Where does that number come from? I've not heard anything like that.
I haven't either. I didn't know if VU Superior is getting that from somewhere or what that is.
I'll tell you where he gets it from, Chris. When you had him on, he talked about how much for each sport, and it totaled 24 million.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's not a lot for. Well, that's not all for football. Was that a football specific question?
Well, that's what I was wondering too. It's a little bit of an unclear question.
I think that's where he's getting it from.
Okay, you're probably right, Luke. Okay, if that's all sports, then that's toward the bottom, you would guess.
Well, and I have a feeling theirs is going to be more women's sports heavy than most for a number of reasons of that total number.
Can they get from Godor's 94? Can they get a good transfer quarterback with the Pavia litigation uncertainty? I know we talked about it, but I still think they can. But they can't halt or pause any of their efforts. I don't think because of the Pavia uncertainty. I think they can, but I'm interested. What does that look like right now?
I think their biggest challenge is to try to slope. I think they can. It's going to be how long can they slow play this until they get an answer on Pavia, and that's the trick.
All right, that's what I got. We answered a lot of them earlier in the show. So,
well, thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you to the listeners. I've got to hop to another show. Anyway, for Luke Wyatt, Billy Derrick, I'm Chris Lee. You've been listening to and watching the Vandy Sports Podcast.